See, it's not so bad. I teased, watching him chomp up whatever vegetables I could find around here. Surprisingly, though, he was actually quite skilled with a knife, and though we never trained with real weapons, he appeared quite natural with it. We could be training it instead of this, you know, he mumbled, slicing faster in a way that I knew meant he wanted to get this over with. Unfortunately, we can't train every second of the day, as much as you'd like to, I said, taking his freshly chopped items to put them into the pot. The makeshift fire acted enough like a stove as I stirred the remnants, adding whatever flavors I could find into the mix. Hopefully the soup would be satisfying enough. Plus, I added, a part of training is training the soul, is it not? Cooking and food itself, I said, walking over to him once more after stirring. It's a way of healing the soul. He hissed, handing me whatever he could, his lips tongued into a grin at his boredness. Just consider this part of training, yeah? After giving him a swift pat on the back, I turned to kneel in front of the pot, hovering above the fire. You had all the equipment and never put it to use, I admired with exhaustion thorough. Sighing in disappointment, I kept my eyes transferred into the soul before me. Stirring mindlessly, knowing Akaza had finished his part, he made his footsteps known to me while he made his way over. Crouching down next to me, he stared at my creation as well, carefully following the movements of my stew. I side-eyed him, one of my brows rising. Can't you at least admit that it smells good? He glanced at me. No, I can't, he stated simply. How boring. Another sigh escaped me. A soothed laugh left his lips. Your scent is much more distracting, to be quite honest. His tone changed. I had to try and hide the way my body stiffened at his claim. We both soon fell silent, and I could almost see him grinning, though still I kept my eyes trained on the soup before me. Is it now? I breathed, my voice betraying me. He hummed in agreement, the floorboards creaking as he moved in closer. Very much addicting, he whispered more the less to himself. I froze, feeling his attention close to me. For reasons I couldn't explain, my body began to shake, especially as his soft breath grazed my cheek, though I didn't dare move or even turn to look at him in fear of how close he was. No, not fear. It was something else. Too bad you can't act on such a claim, I've said, trying to stay calm. Indeed. He was his only response. Then he was gone, in a single swift movement, the lack of him making the side he'd been at feeling cold and empty, especially compared to the heat he'd been given off beforehand, despite the fire in front of me. Only then did I allow myself to turn to him, finding Akaza in the kitchen once more. Grabbing a bowl, he walked over, back towards me, no expression evident upon his face whatsoever. Bastard. I knew he did those things to try and rile me up, but I wasn't about to let him become aware that in some cases it actually worked, and supposedly not in the way that he'd probably figured. Maybe I was spending way too much time with him, and only him, but what scared me the most was that the fact I was growing more and more comfortable with him, in a way that I knew meant I was beginning to rely on him for things. And as he wordlessly passed me the bowl, our gazes lingered on one another. And in that moment, I considered the fact that he knew how I was feeling and what I was thinking. It was truly as though he could read into my mind. Sometimes. I broke our stare, taking the bowl and beginning to fill the single serving dish of the stew I'd made, trying to focus on that. Why? Why had I become so dependent on him? Was it because I've been all on my own before? Maybe since I hadn't had anyone to put that depending nature onto. The second someone came into my life in which I could deliver it to, I was given it my all. My face heated at the thought. How pathetic. Relying on someone for anything at all only revealed vulnerability. One thing I've been caught since. Well, as long as I can remember, actually. Damn it all to hell. I knew that, and yet here I was, able to prevent myself from doing so. With Akaza, he was giving me more than anyone ever had, more than I'd ever believed I could receive. Countless times he'd saved my life. Countless times he's prevented me from making some of the most stupidest decisions I could have ever made. Once I came to terms with all of that he'd truly done for me from the very beginning, I suppose it was actually quite different. It was hard not to rely on him, to want to make him proud and to genuinely happy when he truly was proud of me. What else was there for me to do, to grasp? What other option? Even if he was a demon. Again, that was always something I seemed to forget about the majestic being I've been spending so much time with. I'm going out before sunrise, Akaza then said, snapping me out of my useless thoughts. My face flushed in response, as if he'd just figured out my own darkest secrets. I asked, finishing my serving with one single last scoop. Standing up, I tried my best not to look at him, for reasons I wasn't sure of. He was by the door. A quick glance in his direction told me enough. I'm going into the city before the sun rises, just to pick up some supplies. Are you going to be all right here? I nodded, beginning to dig into my food as my brain diminished what I've been thinking of. I'm going to sleep after this anyways. I'm exhausted. A pause on his end, enough to make me look over to him. There he stood, his vest hanging casually, covering half of his exposed chest, his loose pants tied by their usual strings, cuffling by his ankles with gems that I has always admired. Something about him was truly admirable, memorizing in a way. I mean, you could almost definitely never find a human who looked so ethereal. Though I suppose it had to be his demonic nature. All right, well, have a good rest, Jen, he said quickly, and with that, he was gone, the door closing behind him in a flash. I stared at the space he'd left behind, suddenly finding the usual crowded home far too empty. The sunset was beautiful tonight. In fact, I've never been anything like it. Waking up early for the evening, it took me a minute to comprehend that it was a scene of the setting sun rather than that one of a rising one. Being so used to the change in my schedule, it was almost easy enough to make such a mistake. Akaza's townhouse didn't have much for windows, and even though the limited amounts that coverings at all times during the day, so in order to begin able to watch the stunning sky shifting its colors every few moments, I had to come outside. It was chilly, enough so that I had to wear a casual kimono along with my white scarf, the fabric still large enough to be used as a blanket itself, hugging it around me tighter as the breezy breeze that drifted past. I tried my best to savor the moment of the cold breath that tasted on my tongue, the sun upon my face, before it melted into the shadows once more. Oh, did I miss sunlight? I suppose in a way, of course I did, although I was getting stronger, more powerful because I wasn't spending time outside during the day. I mean, it wasn't like Akaza could train me much during that time, not unless we'd been training inside the house, which was nearly impossible to the lack of size. I sat comfortably upon the small porch in front of the townhouse, bringing my knees to my chest in the same odd habit of resting my chin upon my raised knees. Training. It was much different now. Or maybe it wasn't, and it only appeared that way due to how little I paid attention to it in the past. It's been over a month now, yet ever so, it felt like an entire life had just completely changed. No, I didn't just feel like it. It had changed. For a moment, Akaza had appeared from those bushes all that time ago. If I had known what it would have brought me to then, yet even I stared through the trees surrounding at the glistening sun, I couldn't help but feel as though there was something wrong with my previous thought. As if something else was missing. As if my life would change far too soon. And that all of this was just the beginning. I assumed it was always the truth, in a way. I somehow was always aware that This was a lack-apprehended bit of my life. New life. I was still an assassin, yes, but it felt like now I was becoming something much more than that. I couldn't explain it, and honestly, it didn't make much sense to me either, knowing that all I'd really been doing for the past month was trying to become better at my job, and thus gain more money. And yet, something had changed, in a way that I couldn't explain. Was it the demon who'd found me? He was the cause. But the questions that seemed to bother me most was, what would make Kiyumi of this? What would she think about Akaza? Did she even know demons existed? At the last thought, my stomach tightened, because I truly hoped she didn't know. I hoped she would never know. I never wanted her to experience any demons. She had enough of her own. But Akaza, was he so bad? It was odd, using such a terrible term for him, even more so because of what I had said to him long ago. Well, I should say not so. Still, I stuck at my notion. That was the title of a demon, more or less, like a curse that was cast upon those who were ultimately unfortunate. And I only now realized how it was wrong for me to believe that all demons are the same. Humans aren't. In fact, no other species was. Why did I believe that all demons would be monsters the way they were described in stories and myths? Maybe society only wanted to focus on the bad side instead of ignoring the good side. A lot of the time, we did that with humans as well. For lots of things, actually. And Akaza was unique. I knew from the first moment I'd seen him that he was special. I hadn't been able to put it into words at the time, his appearance having been so intimidating. But now, I broke away from my thoughts, looking back up to the sky to see the orange melting away into hues of magenta and violet, mixing with the multicolored and pale stained clouds. I could picture myself, years ago, wanting to take up a paintbrush, drawing it across the canvas with ease, the mere inspiration or even memory of the things I'd been coming to life so easily inside my mind. It would sometimes have felt like the brush was moving on its own according instead of my own command. I missed it. That freeing feeling. Pushing that part of me away had been difficult, but each and every time it caused to poke through, even just a little bit, it became second nature for me to push it down, straight down, until it wouldn't come back up for a while. The thought of my sister always came to mind, halting any further thoughts. And the exact same thing happened now. Just as the sun completed its descent into the horizon, I shook my head as if getting rid of such a useless part of me, not allowing myself for a moment more to look at it. I stood from the stairs of the porch, making my way back over to the sliding door and into the dark-ridden house again, the place in which I truly belonged. Some days, waiting for Akaza to return was probably the most annoying thing I had ever done. Though I couldn't blame him, I still found it hard to deal with when he just randomly leave for a day, returning an hour or two after the sun set in order for us to continue our training. Even when I asked him to tell me where he was going, he wouldn't entirely say. But oftentimes, his eyes would give it away, and at the look he would give me, I would decide not to push him further, knowing that he probably went out to fill his own needs for a demon, his hunting time, one would say. And also, I wouldn't simply wait. Even with Akaza knowing about my high levels of impatience, I swear sometimes he would take extra long to return. Like today, for example, stars litter the sky as I waited back outside, this time standing upon the porch instead of sitting, watching as the stars twinkled their little lights. My arms crossed as I waited. I'm almost been about to just head back inside and assume he wasn't going to come, and while, at the same time, cursing himself multiple times inside my head. Before long, his pink head appeared. "Have a nice snack?" I asked, glancing at his approaching figure. "Infatuating, like always." He snarked back at me. It didn't take me long to realize he was a bit grumpy because of that. I didn't particularly care, however. He passed me on the porch, about to walk inside before I grabbed his forearm, stopping him right next to me. "Why did it take you so long?" I asked, cursing myself at the change in my tone. Akaza must have picked it up himself, for his brow shot straight up, tilted his head, adding to his features. "Why does it matter? We have plenty of time to train. We never take up the entire night anyways." My eyes fell, some of my confidence wearing out, for reasons I didn't entirely understand. In truth, I really just didn't want to argue tonight. In fact, if he wasn't in the best mood, then I didn't want to argue with him ever. It was one thing I truly hated, and when it came to Akaza, I despised it being more so. Somehow, if he were to get mad or disappointed at me, it would hurt quite a bit, like a physical pain inside my chest. He hardly did, though, but even so, I assumed it was because Akaza was one person I counted on, and I didn't want to lose that. I didn't want to mess up again. But that didn't mean that I was going to let his mood ruin mine. I frowned. "I know, but you never go out that late. I was only wondering why. Is that so wrong?" He must have heard a bit of hurt in my voice, and shockingly, instead of mocking it in a way I expected him to, his gaze flickered, softening slightly. I could feel his body loosen as its tension, and his arms underneath my grip soften as well. I look away, taking my hand off him. "I just had some trouble," he said, his tone coming back. A pause. "Sorry." He added on quietly. I straightened my back at the word. I couldn't remember the last time he genuinely apologized. And if, to make sure for myself, I turned towards him, trying to read his face. Maybe I wasn't the only one who was changing. Or maybe Akaza just wants to keep you happy so you'll agree with his part of the deal at the end. Yet again, the thought of that was enough to hurt, even a little bit. But I read it. Along with so many things, I grinned, lightening the mood for us a bit. He seemed to recognize what I was doing, catching on quite fast in a way that he somehow always did. "You can prove you're sorry by not going easy on me tonight, demon," I said, eyes lightening up even at the sound of it. He chuckled, his eyes kissing as his tattooed lines. "You've got quite the wicked tongue sometimes, you know." His soothing voice was back to its usual tone, and I smiled even at the thought. I jumped off the porch, walking backwards and away from the house, still facing him. "You have no idea," in response. "In fact, everything about me is wicked." He grinned, and it was all I needed to know he was finally in the proper mood to fight. Even though he was quite a few feet away from me, he was now right in front of my face, his eyes aglow in a way that complemented his sharp-toothed smile. I was used to it by now, his whole sneaking up on me thing, so my body didn't react, though it never failed to make my heart skip a beat, no matter how many times he did it. "Are you going to prove it, Yen?" Akaza asked in a whisper, and I smiled, trying to take control of my heart at a thrill that my entire body and mind. I nodded, backing away as he followed me. "You know, while you're out for so long, I tend to practice new techniques on my own." He raised a single pink brow. "It must be time to finally reveal them to you then," I finished. "I sure hope so."